I first made a video talking about Minecraft server currency a decade ago, and yet the issue is still not solved, or is it? You see, this popular video says that wheat is a great currency, and they acknowledge the obvious issues. These are problems they propose fixing by limiting production and banning bone meals, which does solve the obvious issue. However, this does require an insane degree of control, which was fixed in this video from KCJ, which claims that Nether stars backed by signed books are the ideal currency, which is how it works in the real world, and so it's a better idea than wheat. But what is the 5-star solution? Well, this is controversial, but let's explain why these are bad currencies first, because I think to explain what makes a perfect currency requires explaining why wheat is not that. Solution 1: wheat. Okay, wheat sounds like a great idea, and I think that Pinecone was absolutely cooking here when he said,
"See, the way currency works, essentially anything could be the official currency, as long as the government values it."
This is technically true, and it's something that you should keep in mind. However, for the sake of this server, it's going to require extreme server controls for wheat to work, and what you might call authoritarianism. Now, authoritarianism is something that lots of people disagree with on an ideological level, but this is Minecraft, and so the practical reason to be opposed to it is that it uses limited resources, which in the real world would be paying the police to break into people's home, making sure they're not breaking bread out of currency, and in Minecraft would be the server admin's time, making sure that players aren't getting their hands on illicit bone meal, and that the wheat growing is being matched to the supply and the demand of the wheat. And so this is a great system because the benefits of it are clear. Currency would be durable, that is unlikely to break, fungible, because as long as wheat is valuable because of those server controls, you would be able to easily pay 1 wheat to 30 wheat, and you could easily make 1 wheat worth exactly 1/30 of 30 wheat. That's nice, but also it's portable because you can move any amount of wheat around your server. However, the drawbacks are clear. Scarcity, which is required for any currency to work, is only possible through an extreme amount of server controls, or what you might call currency controls here, and an amount of enforcement that would make the Soviet Union blush. Wheat is useful, and not allowing it for non-currency reasons would make breads and cakes rarer for no good reason. People like bread and cakes in Minecraft too, and breeding animals much more than they like server gimmicks, and so this is a bit of a flawed idea, if a fun one that I believe Pinecone was just playing around with for personal use, but that's where the Nether Star idea comes in, because this video starts with a bold claim.
I believe the ideal currency for vanilla Minecraft servers exists as Nether Star-backed securities issued as signed books.
This actually is smart. Most items in Minecraft are farmable, however, Nether Stars are not, and so why not fill shulker boxes with them and then make books that are signed to represent that currency? These could be called securities, which would give a value of 1 book to 1,728 Nether Stars and would allow you to trade that many Nether Stars without having to move that shulker box around. Instead, trading that book would give you access to that shulker box worth of stars. This is exactly how real currency works. The UK currency is called a pound because it was equivalent to a pound of silver when it was first introduced. But people didn't move that pound of silver around. Instead, they had notes that were worth a pound and that will promise to pay the bearer on demand the sum of a pound, and these could be redeemed at any time at a central bank. Even better, since most players don't redeem these, and most British people did not, you can actually sign multiple books per shulker box, allowing for each shulker box to be lent out 5 to 10 times. This means that you can actually have fractional reserve banking in Minecraft, which is incredibly cool. This is a great idea, and that makes it a fun and wonderful solution in its own right. However, it also has the benefit of being a hard-to-counterfeit currency. This is an important part of any functional currency, and it would be very time-consuming to farm all of the Nether Stars required to make your own currency, meaning players are very unlikely to. This is perfect, and you might be therefore saying, wait, this is a great money solution. How is this not a 5-star plan? Well, here are the drawbacks. The first one is the fact that it's not likely to be very fungible. Imagine if the smallest dollar bill was 1,728. Well, we wouldn't be able to buy bread or water, and this is a big problem on a Minecraft server where you're probably not trading for the biggest things imaginable at that scale, and so actually being able to get currency in the smaller units requires a lot of work from the central bank, and even if the bank goes through all that work of either farming for literally tens of thousands of hours, or maybe a little bit of cheating, the currency is still going to be fakeable via those same means. And so ultimately, this requires the creation of a great deal of trust, just like our current system, but unlike our current system, which has all of the checks in place to make sure bank runs can't happen, this could happen in the Minecraft server. Because it's still authoritarian in nature, there is an expansion of monetary supply that happens at the whims of the server's owners because they can lend out the same paper that represents the shulker box full of Nether stars. If everyone demands to get their Nether stars at the same time, the bank will go kaput, there will be a huge explosion, and the currency will collapse, which is a problem because this idea proposes stealing people's currency or buying it off them for this new currency, which could become worthless at any time. Gold has value in the real world because it is a store of value, but also because it's great for jewelry and other electronical uses, and in that way, diamonds are actually a better currency because you can use them even if they collapse in value, whereas 1,726 Nether stars, even if you can get it back from the central bank, it's going to be hard to justify using as anything else, let alone the smallest unit of currency. So this is a fine solution, but with a great deal of drawbacks. And so what is the best solution? The best solution. Both of the ideas so far have been very good, except they both require server tyranny, or what you might call authoritarianism, looking at your server players as being plebs that you must control, and I think that if this is your goal anyway, then instead of using wheat, use poison potatoes. These are like wheat, except 100 times harder to farm, and they're also far less likely to be used in baking, and so you limit less of your game by saying these are currency only, because who wants to eat their poison potatoes besides as an act of defiance? In the same way I could eat money as an act of defiance, but I usually don't. And similarly, I would say that if you want to have a system of fiat currency where it's fake and based on the server anyway, then you can have the books without any need for the actual requirement to back them up by anything, because you're forcing players to use it nonetheless. And so what I would say is you could do the same with far less authoritarianism by simply using deep slate emerald ore. I think the easiest currency to set up, I did not realize there was a room back here. I think the easiest currency to set up in your world is deep slate emerald, because this is something which cannot be created. No matter how many emeralds or deep slate blocks you get, you can't create this, you can only find it, so it has a finite supply, and so it's like Bitcoin or gold, but instead of being backed by your server's willingness to spy on everyone, like our other solutions, instead this is constrained by how many chunks have been explored and mined. This means that there is a theoretical inflation that could occur if everyone tried to find these, but with a limited number of chunks in your world, and fundamentally everyone's world, and a very small number of these that exist, deep slate emerald ore could be a really great currency that requires very little centralization while having a floor and requiring no authoritarian rule simply to exist. Similarly, I think if we're going down the argument of the fact that this is a great currency by itself, you could also use basically any default Minecraft item currency with a fixed supply by looking into cursed items from the past. Take my world, for example. I have these chainmail efficiency leggings that I found from a chest, and you can make the same argument for dragon eggs as well. Any one of these fun, cursed, previous Minecraft items, as soon as they become unattainable, they become great as a currency because you know people can't counterfeit them, at least in legit survival. And so as a result, if you're looking for the best currency, I think leggings are poor because they don't stack, but I think enchanted, or specifically deep slate emerald ore, is something that will work much better. You don't want to enchant your emerald ore. I don't think that will go well for you. But what will work well for you is thinking about how actually this big question of a currency is still assuming that there is a central planet in your world, which isn't an assumption we should be taking for granted. Solution 3. The free market. The one crucial fact that every video about currency in Minecraft misses is that you can't actually accurately simulate modern day societies in Minecraft. We don't have welfare states, taxes, and moral beliefs in the rules, and so we shouldn't even try to implement them. Instead, we should use Hayekian principles. This is what you might simply describe as the free market, which runs some decent percentage of most Western economies already, and it does have downsides in the real world, but are you really worried about income inequality or monopolies on your Minecraft server? I assume probably not. And so I would say don't centrally plan, use revealed preferences. Instead of waiting for your currency to slowly fall apart because it requires your iron fist to run, have no rules on currency and allow the market to decide what it wants to do. This should work as bartering at first before eventually the market decides on either diamonds or emeralds, just like many popular YouTube servers do, which are useful items and they do have a free floating value, which can be scary. What if your savings go down in value? Well, inflation will occur, naturally, but nobody needs to be killed for for their wheat farming, or told to use books that are at the risk of a bank run and are only worth something because you say so. In other words, you might effectively be king of your Minecraft server because you have the ability to shut it down at any point, just like someone with access to the nuclear codes, but you still should not choose to run it tyrannically. This is something people accept when it comes to, say, building. You wouldn't dream of telling people every build on the server has to be made out of mushroom blocks. You wouldn't dream of telling people that they're not allowed to explore any dark forest biomes that they find. And so in the same way, you shouldn't limit players' choice when it comes to currency, because I think that if we look at wheat as being the equivalent of the Neolithic Revolution, if we look at the Nether Star-backed securities as being the central banking revolution, the idea of looking at the free market principles and the invisible hand is a 4-star solution, because free markets can and do choose wrong, but more often than not they choose interesting, and as we've seen from the last couple hundred years, they choose things that have led to better standards for all players. In reality, I would say, therefore, the need for a currency is something you can never truly impose on people, because even with your Kim Jong-un levels of control, Minecraft is a game that people can choose to play or not. The best currency is whatever your players want to use, and so if players on your servers are trading with diamonds, don't force them to use wheat or netherite stars unless they actively want it. If your players all decide they want a fixed currency, assist them with that, and if you want to build a roleplay server, then I think Deep Slate Emerald, Poison Potatoes, or securities based on anything that is finite is great, but otherwise, appreciate the only real currency you can force people to use is their time, or their real world currency, which is what I ask when people want to look at my weird member-only videos. Except, actually, you know what, following the logic of newer is better, if we want to get a 5-star solution, we have to look at some ideology that came between the 1800s and now, and obviously that means... play the Soviet anthem for a few seconds. Okay, no, seriously though, I think that a better solution to this would be Georgism, free markets, but with a breakup of monopolies, namely the world's most natural monopoly, which is land. Don't let any one player control all of your goods, that's important, and charge players for the land they occupy, because the truth of every Minecraft server is there is a finite amount of space, and the actual biggest problem to deal with is not telling people what to build in that space, or indeed what currency to use when they make trades on that space, but instead you should tax players by making them pay with their time if they want to have a space that is incredibly prime. That is to say, if there are players on your server that have incredible real estate but don't play anymore, and therefore aren't going to be paying your tax, then you should repossess their land. And so in other words, I'm saying Minecraft servers should recreate Monopoly the board game, which actually sounds really fun now that I say it. Anyway, thanks for listening to my currency rants. I promise not to do this for at least another 10 years, and I'll see you in the next one.